Hello, I'm Emrys. I'm returning today to talk more about how we can have mindfulness in our current lives. Thanks to the East Haddam Public Library, the Rathbun Library, and the Friends of the library. You can contact me through Decadent Wellness on Facebook or at decadent-wellness.com. And I'm happy to talk to you more about mindfulness, meditation, and questions you might have about this discussion today. So I like to use as a launching place a book that is in the library's collection. So today we have the book Whole Brain Living by Jill Bolte Taylor. So Jill Bolte Taylor is a neuroanatomist, and you may be familiar with her because she had the first TED Talk that went viral many years ago. And in that TED Talk, she was talking about her experience of having a stroke as a neuroanatomist who really understood the science and then was having the lived experience. Obviously, two very different things with a lot of overlap. So she did this TED Talk about what it was like to navigate that experience. And since then, she's also done a lot of work, obviously recovering and talking about her insights, not only from her training and her background professionally, but also in practice in healing her own brain and understanding how the physical anatomy of the brain relates to how we think, how we feel, how we behave. The subtitle of this book is The Anatomy of Choice and the 4 Characters that Drive Our Life. So she uses this idea of 4 characters tied to 4 physical locations in our brains. And those 4 locations in our brains are each associated with particular traits and behaviors. They all have strengths and they all have challenges. And what I love that she's doing in this book is she's really bringing our attention to, oh, I can shift on purpose, right? If I'm maybe having a frustration or a challenge and things feel as if they're getting out of balance in a particular direction in my thinking or my feeling or my behavior, I can actually learn where in my brain I need to access to help balance that out. And so the title, Whole Brain Living, is really pointing toward, let's get the whole team rolling together, right? So it's really interesting and exciting, and I think has a lot to do with being mindful, right? Not being too far in one direction or another, being able to have the self-awareness to understand where we might be operating from and what the advantages and disadvantages of that particular perspective might be. So the book overall is focused on helping us embrace, listen to, and nurture all our characters. So all those 4 parts of the brain, there's the right hemisphere of the brain and the left hemisphere of the brain, and each of them has a thinking center and a feeling center. The thinking center on the right side of the brain does things very differently from the thinking center on the left side of the brain. And similarly, the feeling centers do things differently in the 2 hemispheres. So all 4 of these quadrants, which she's calling characters, have really valuable perspectives and gifts. And like I said before, they can also kind of get out of balance and go too far into their limitations. So Dr. Taylor is really focusing on using these all together intentionally, skillfully, as the next phase of evolution. So of course we have the anatomical evolution, where parts of our brains that exist in humans today didn't always exist in human brains, right? Human brains have been evolving and they have more parts than they used to. But she's talking about how we're actually using those parts, how we're skillfully having them communicate with each other. and getting that balance of the whole brain to help support how we're showing up in our own lives and for each other. So one of the things that I've found really helpful since reading this book is noticing how, as I get to know which character I'm in my own brain, which she really talks us through as she's writing, she gives really good examples of what things to look for and how to identify which part of our brains we're in. As I get to know those in myself, not only do I become more skillful at balancing out those perspectives, like I said, not being in just that one character or quadrant, but drawing in from the other three as well. But I also find that if I'm interacting with someone and their behavior seems very pronounced in a particular direction, it feels very soothing to me to recognize, okay, this seems as if this person is in this part of their brain. And I don't know exactly how to explain why that feels comforting for me. I think maybe the best way to say it is if someone's having a very different experience of a moment than I am, that can feel very disorienting. It can feel frustrating, right? We might feel either they're not understanding us or we're not understanding them, or both, right? It can feel sort of like big disconnection. Whereas if I'm able to contextualize it and see, oh yeah, I recognize this part of the brain in this moment, it really allows for coming back into connection more. For me, that's been my personal experience of working with what I'm learning from this book. And this is one of those books that I read, I reread, I keep pulling pieces out from. So you might find that it's the type of book that you want to refer to again and again. And for an exercise that might feel good, that has to do with this book, I'll mention that the part of our brain that is really skillful at organization and planning is a different part of the brain from the part of our brains that's really good at going with the flow and being creative. And when I say that, that probably sounds as if, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Those are two very different things. There's a lot of order and structure in the part of our brains that's good at planning and organizing. And there's a lot of free flow and movement, not so much structure, in the part of our brains that's really good at creativity and being in the flow, going with the flow, being in the moment. And sometimes we might experience people as being one type of person or the other type of person from these two examples, right? So it's so interesting to me to take her work and really understand we all contain both of those, but we might be using one of those a lot more, to the point that it seems as if we don't even have the other part, right? We might know someone who we think, oh, they're not organized at all, they have no structure. Or we might think the opposite. They're so organized, they're so structured, they're not able to go with the flow at all, right? And so it's almost like when we go to the gym and we work out, which muscle groups are we using? Are we using all our muscle groups, maybe doing some days and others the other days, but getting the whole body? Are we doing things that allow us to move in ways that go beyond just the performed exercises? Are we getting the whole realm of being strong in our bodies? It's that same idea, but with our brains, right? Are we allowing ourselves to sometimes be very structured and organized when we need to be, and also sometimes be very free-flowing and creative when we need to be? And are we assigning those comparable value? Are we recognizing these are both strong things that can get carried away, right? We can get too rigid and structured. We can get too loosey-goosey and out there. And so they're both valuable. We want to use some skills sometimes, other skills other times. And we just want to be able to use both sets of skills, right? Not always be in one category or the other. So I'm loving if I feel two, one way or another, remembering, it's just a switch away. It's just another neighborhood in my brain that I can access to balance that out. And then, as I said before, extending that to others as well. You know, if it feels like maybe I'm more in a structured place and somebody else is more in a go with the flow place, remembering, oh yeah, that's just parts of our brains that we're in. It doesn't mean that we can't figure this out together. So I hope that this very, very, very surface brief description of an incredibly rich book is enough to get you interested. I do know some people I've recommended the book to have been listening to the book on tape. There are, or audiobook, I should say. It's not actually on tape anymore. There are some things in the book that are charts. I'm trying to flip through and see some of those right now to show you. So if you were to do the audiobook, those PDFs would be downloadable, but you might prefer to have a hard copy of the book just to be able to really see the charts that she's taking us through that help us understand what it feels like to be in character 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, as she calls them. So I hope this invitation feels enticing to you, you're really interested, and you get into Jill Bolte Taylor's work, because I think it's just a fascinating way, as she's pointing to do our own evolution, to do our own next steps with the anatomy that's there in our brains in a way that feels better for us to navigate life and has overflow benefit for those around us. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as I said, Whole Brain Living by Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor, available through the libraries. And you're welcome to be in touch if you want to ask questions about that or mindfulness or meditation. You can find me, Emrys, at Decadent Wellness on Facebook or decadent-wellness.com. Thank you so much.